students, welcome to another biology class with Miss Joy Gold. From our last class, we learned about digestive system, and moving on to this new class, we'll be learning on the modes of nutrition. That is, the modes of nutrition in several organisms. And I hope at the end of this class, would have learned on the modes of nutrition in various organisms. Now, at the end of this class, our objectives at the end of this class would have learned on the modes of nutrition. Now, from our knowledge on the digestive system, how digestion occurs, now we'll be learning on how these foods, how does these organisms feed. At the end of this class, I hope that every student would have learned the major classes of the modes of nutrition. Under these classes where we have the autotrophic, the heterotrophic. I also hope that we would have learned the subdivisions of heterotrophic nutrition. That is, the other types. What are the other divisions under the heterotrophic nutrition? I also believe that at the end of this class, every student would have been able to explain the feeding mechanism in holozoic organisms. Holozoic organisms such as the tapeworm, the cockroach. We would have also learned about feeding habits. How does these organisms feed? What kind of feeding habits do they exhibit? I also hope that at the end of this class, we will be able to explain the process of feeding in protozoa, hydra, and mammals. That is, how does the protozoa, amoeba, feed? How does hydra feed, and mammals as well? Now, what is nutrition? Nutrition is the process of taking in food and converting it into energy and other vital nutrients required for life. That is how our body obtain and use this food. Now, the modes of nutrition. There are two major classes of nutrition generally in all organisms. Now, the first mode of nutrition. Modes of nutrition is simply the way by which all living organisms, including plants, animals, and even human beings, obtain their food. Now, what are the modes of nutrition? We have the autotrophic nutrition and the heterotrophic nutrition. I will take that again. We have the autotrophic nutrition and heterotrophic nutrition. Now, when we say autotrophic nutrition, what is autotrophic? It is the type of nutrition in which organisms they are able to synthesize their food, that is, manufacture their food. The organisms that can manufacture their food, we call them autotrophs. So, autotrophic nutrition is simply the type of nutrition where organisms can produce their own food. Now, we have the divisions of the autotrophic nutrition. We have the photosynthetic nutrition and we have the chemosynthetic nutrition. Now, photosynthetic nutrition can be seen in most of the plants, bacteria, and blue-green algae. Now, when we talk about photosynthetic nutrition, we are simply talking about photosynthesis. It is a chemical process by which green plants obtain inorganic substance such as carbon dioxide and water from their surrounding and synthesize their own food. Chemosynthetic nutrition. It is another mode of nutrition in which certain bacteria synthesize organic compounds from simple inorganic materials. These inorganic materials include carbon dioxide, ammonia, water, and nitrate. Examples of organisms or bacteria that exhibit chemosynthetic. We have the nitrosomas, the nitrobacter. This slide demonstrates the photosynthetic nutrition and the chemosynthetic nutrition. Now, the second part of nutrition is the heterotrophic nutrition. Heterotrophic nutrition is the type of nutrition in which organisms do not make their own food. They depend on the autotrophs for their food. Heterotrophic was derived from two Greek words, hetero, which means different. Holozoic organisms, they are under the heterotrophic organisms. The feeding mechanism is simply the mechanism by which an organism obtain and utilizes food material, that is, obtain and uses food material. How these organisms take this food material and use them. That is simply what feeding mechanism is. What are the types of feeding mechanism? On the basis of the method for ingesting food in heterotroph, that is the way they take in food, there are 4 types of feeding mechanisms in organisms. Now, these feeding mechanisms include 4 modification and mechanism of feeding associated with the Holozoic organisms. Now we have the absorbing mechanism. An example is the tapeworm. The tapeworm is an endoparasite which carries out parasitic feeding on its host, which is the man. It has no mouth but absorbs digested food from the intestines of its host. That is, the digested food in our intestine, in our small intestine, is absorbed. Another feeding mechanism is the biting and chewing mechanism. An example is the grasshopper or cockroach. Now let's take the cockroach as an example. It has mouth organs like mandibles, maxill, labrum, hypopharynx, and labium. This feeding mechanism helps the cockroach in biting or chewing food. We have the sucking mechanism. Sucking mechanism, there are 3 popular organisms which exhibit sucking mechanisms, and they are mosquito, butterfly, and housefly. But we'll be looking at the mosquito as an example. The mosquito possesses a piercing mouth called proboscis, which is used for sucking the blood of man and animals. We have organisms exhibit different feeding habits. That is, several organisms has its or her own feeding habits. We have majorly 3, which are the filter feeding, the deposit feeding, and the fluid feeding. I will take that again. We have the filter feeding, deposit feeding, and fluid feeding. Up next is the video to show the feeding in Hydra.
Everything that lives must one day die, right? Well, maybe not everything. Consider the Hydra. It's named after a many-headed monster from Greek mythology. Chop off one head and 2 grow in its place. That myth isn't too far from the real Hydra's death-defying abilities. They're cousins to jellyfish. See the resemblance? but hydra live in freshwater. Its body is a hollow column with walls only 2 cells thick. Its head is just a bunch of tentacles surrounding a mouth, no eyes or brain. The whole thing is about as long as a grain of rice. The hungry hydra stretches out its tentacles to snag swimming prey. Microscopic harpoons hook the water flea, injecting it with paralyzing neurotoxins. Then it's down the hatch. The hydra uses those nutrients to make more hydra. Check out this bud. It's a clone sprouting right from the hydra's side. Hydra can reproduce sexually too, but most often they just clone themselves. Chip off the old block. Hydra are constantly regenerating their own bodies too, replacing all of their cells every 20 days. They can do that because roughly half of the cells in their bodies are stem cells, which can develop into all the different types of specialized cells you need to build or rebuild a body. Stem cells only make up a tiny percentage of our bodies, and our stem cells degrade over time. That's why we age. But a hydra can make near-perfect copies of its stem cells, basically forever. It's called non-senescence, biological immortality. Having all those stem cells allows hydra to recover from all kinds of damage. All right, here we go. No body? Not to worry. No head? No problem. As long as the chopped off chunk has some stem cells, it's ready to regrow. In a couple days, the severed head has a new body. And the foot, it's got a brand new head. Soon, they'll both be as good as new, except for maybe some lingering trust issues. To test the limits of their ability to recover, researchers came up with an experiment. This hydra is genetically engineered so that under ultraviolet light, its exterior cells glow purple and interior ones glow green. Scientists basically blend up a bunch of these hydra, leaving a heap of mixed up cells. Right away, the cells start reorganizing. Those purple outer layer cells migrate out. The cells from the inside squirm back into the center. The hydra dumps cells from the interior to restore its hollow shape. The stem cells start dividing and differentiating to rebuild the rest of the animal. Soon a head starts to form. Sometimes a few little heads compete to be the new top. After a few tumultuous days, what was once a mixed-up pile of cells takes on a familiar shape. Researchers hope to harness hydra's ability to regenerate, to someday slow human aging, or even regrow damaged organs. Maybe this tiny monster will one day show us the way to the mythical fountain of youth. Hey Deep Peeps, our PBS friends here on YouTube are celebrating Earth Day with a ton of special episodes. Head over to Above the Noise, where host Miles Bess asks, can we make room for wildlife in our cities? Thanks, and tell him Deep Look sent you.
Having watched the video, I hope you've learned something about the feeding in hydra and amoeba. See you next class. Bye.